Against violence of women and children under the theme Act and Don't Look Away. Let's take you there now.
Story that I tell in my book, that even after leaving, I felt trapped because of the constant words this person used against me, that they were replaying in my mind. So even though I had left the relationship, I was constantly feeling trapped or feeling stuck because of the words this person said to me that were replaying in my mind, even though he was not physically there. So being trapped comes in different forms and shapes, but it happens and it's real. And it doesn't matter the number of incidences. One incident of abuse can have devastating consequences all the time. And the length of time of the abuse is also not necessarily relevant. A consequence is always devastating. Even one single episode can lead to someone truly not being okay. And the affected or the victim or the survivor needs help and should be prioritized all the time. And of course, the longer the abuse, the likelihood is that the consequences are even more devastating and the intervention will be on a long-term basis. And in South Africa, sadly, and I think the first speaker touched on this, the systems are not in place to assist people who are victims of abuse. The families protect the abuser sometimes. The families protect this person because the person is the breadwinner. The police are not trained or they do not know how to offer support for these victims. And there's also a lack of places of safety. For example, where do these people run to when they are abused? Where does someone go who doesn't have resources? Where do they end up? They end up staying in the relationship for fear of their lives. So we need to really start looking at the systems that are in place to assist victims, everyone affected from abuse. The abuser always is wrong. I think sometimes the victims or the affected sometimes struggle with that. You actually start believing that maybe you are wrong or you caused this person to abuse you or to do what they're doing to you. And it's important to always emphasize when we have these conversations that whatever abuse that happens, that the abuser is always wrong, in spite of whatever reasoning that they give. And the abuser are likely projecting their own demons, their own challenges onto the victim, but it's not an excuse for them to be abusive, and it's not the responsibility of the victim to help the abuser face their demons. So you find a lot of stories with the abuser that, they've got their own childhood traumas, or some of them are just horrible people, but it's not the victim's place to fix this person who is abusing them. And the victim probably, like I did in my story, has existing challenges. And what the abuser would do is, for example, if you've got insecurity issues, the abuser would take and target and use that insecurity that he or she sees that exists, and use it and increase it to an extent that you actually just feel powerless and you are rendered helpless, and you really embrace and become that insecure person. That challenge really overpowers you when you are a victim of abuse. And the aim of the abuser is to disarm, isolate, and harm the victim, taking away their rights. And let me share a little bit about my journey. I have a published memoir titled Trapped in Love that I am personally selling. And it's a journey of overcoming emotional abuse and the lessons I learned from my experience of emotional abuse. And in summary, just to paint the picture of my story, the abuse was in 2003, when I was registered for my first master's degree to qualify as a clinical psychologist. So basically, I finished school at 16. 4 years after that, I had an honors, and I was turning 21 when I was doing my first year of my first master's to become a clinical psychologist. And I was studying, and I met this person that I called Joe at that time. Joe was about 10 years or 8 years older than me, so a little bit older than me. And after he met me, we started this relationship, and after 3 months, we were engaged. So the relationship was quick, and we were engaged after about 3 months. And I must say, in reflection, the monster that existed in Joe was already there. So there were evidence of him being excessively jealous, subtle evidence of this character that he later then came out to become very abusive. So from the beginning, there were traces of, an abusive character. And when he moved to another province to further his studies, to specialize in psychiatry, that is when the monster within Joe actually became alive. So he would then diagnose me. Remember, we both now, I'm a psychologist and he's a psychiatrist to be. He would diagnose me with clinical disorders. So he would diagnose me with a bipolar personality disorder, and he would diagnose me with all sorts of things in an attempt just to break me. He would use things I told him. So I would tell him some of my challenges, and he would take those challenges and, create them into being a diagnosis. And you must remember, Joe is a quiet, reserved person who goes to church, who speaks in tongues. So in society, Joe is actually respected. And here I come, and he is so angry. And cognitively, I knew that I did not have the diagnosis. I mean, I was studying psychology, right? So I had the diagnosis, the book that we used to diagnose. I knew I didn't meet the criteria of any of the diagnoses that he diagnosed me with. But I actually started to believe him and internalize this. And so when he became this monster all the time now, he would give me double bound messages, which is typical of people who are abusive. So they will tell you, I love you. And the next minute, I hate you. You're a horrible person. And the next minute, they give this confusing messages that do not make sense. So he would tell me I've got a personality disorder. And the next moment, he's forcing that his parents come to do the lobola negotiations. So the messages was, back and front. And because we're in a different province, we would speak on the phone a lot. But he would be happy, hang up, and the next moment call me back, and he's calling me and diagnose me and swearing at me and calling me all sorts of names and telling me to not hang out with people. So basically isolating me. And I knew deep down that there is nothing wrong with being diagnosed with, any diagnosis, because you can seek help. But when he diagnosed me, it cut deep. I believed him. I internalized everything he said and actually believed it and started to live as if I'm a person who is unwell. And I began to question my values, because he would, I had tattoos, for example, and he would tell me, how dare you get tattoos? People with bipolar personality disorder get tattoos. And people who dress the way you dress are not okay in the head. They've got A, B, and C. And I actually started to question my sanity. I was so confused, the whole time. And he stripped me of the little confidence I had and really rendered me helpless. And this is very typical, the double bound messages and isolation and making someone feel as if they are lost and alone and isolating them. That's typical of the character of people who are abusive. And, I kept on postponing the negotiations, because remember, we were engaged. I kept on postponing, and that triggered him more. So he would say, we must get married immediately, and, start a family but immediate with the same breath, he would then tell me, but you are such a useless person. You will amount to nothing. You are worthless. He said all these things, and he would criticize my journey as a clinical psychologist to tell me that I'm a useless psychologist. I will amount to nothing. And finally, after months of this, so the relationship overall was little over a year. So we got engaged, and then this emotional torture was there for a few months. And after what I deem was this emotional torture that I suffered through daily, I decided to leave the relationship. And because the incongruency I got from him was just not worth it. So there was a little bit of fight left in me that made a decision that I need to leave, because I'm exhausted. I can't live like this forever. And he would say that no one will love me, and no one would want me. He's just tolerating me. He's doing me a favor by marrying me. And some of my behaviors are not what a wife must behave like, and his wife mustn't behave that way. And I finally asked him, okay, then please go give this ring to your wife. And I left. And I left knowing that I can never please him. I knew right then when I decided to leave that he was not okay. And he tried to get me to stay by making me, by saying to me, what will people say? Because we are from the same neighborhood. What will people say? People are going to be asking questions. He wanted me to feel bad and to remain in the relationship. But I said, I don't care anymore. And I decided to leave because I knew that this guy is not the one I want to spend forever with. But the challenge is, even though cognitively I knew I didn't want to spend my life with this guy, his words I internalized. So when I left that day, I actually forgave him and I said I left him. I had internalized a negative view of self. I hated myself. So everything he had said about me, I actually had internalized and believed, and I hated myself. And even when he stalked me, I just, he continued to do so after I left. I changed my number. I did not want him, and I was not interested, and I was not angry with him. I just concluded he's unwell. But my challenge was I hated my skin. So from that day, I started to actually pray that I am taken in my sleep. I used to meditate on my death. I used to ask for, our Creator to take me from this earth because I am tired. I don't want to live anymore. And, it happened that from when I left the relationship around early 2005, that I lived like that, constantly praying to be taken away from this earth. And I suppressed it. I avoided going there. So sometimes in that period when I left, the depressed feelings would come up. And what I would do, I would just go see someone, get some medication, but I would never actually sit down with myself and be open to the healing. I was never open to healing. So I would just, give the psychologist and psychiatrist 40% of my issue and not really go deep into why I hate myself so much. I collected money. I went to get the tattoos removed because his voice was in my mind that people like me with tattoos have bipolar personality disorder. So I went to do all these things, even though I knew he was unwell, but his voice was constantly in my mind. His voice was tormenting me, and it tormented me, people, for about a decade. So it tormented me daily in my existence for about 10 years. And I was so angry with myself. I didn't understand. I'm wired like a perfectionist. I didn't understand how I allowed this man to hurt me, the way that he did. I couldn't forgive myself. And I struggled with that for 10 years. And in that 10 years, obviously, because I was hurting, I always say to people that when you are hurting, no one can love you out of the hurt. I had to sit with the hurt and the pain and make the decision that I needed to heal. New relationships in that period never worked because I was not okay. I was not able to form proper relationship because I was hurting. So even though you are avoiding certain pains or things that have happened. Oh, even though you are avoiding, going there, even though you are avoiding everything that's happening, it doesn't make it go away. So for 10 years, I struggled with his voice. And that's when, after I left, I decided to jot down and write down the incident that happened, the reality, my story. I wrote it down. But in the 10 years, I struggled to publish it. And I believe it's because I always believed I was writing a book to motivate people. But I felt my book did not have an ending. And rightly so. I think it's because I was not healed. And I wrote just about my pain, but the book did not have an ending. Like, I wanted to motivate people with my story, but I couldn't motivate people because there was no happy ending, basically. So in 2013, fast forward a decade later, after all the struggles, when I turned 31, remember this relationship was when I was 21, but when I turned 31, on my birthday, actually, in February, I actually had a prayer and I said, you know what, I'm sure there's a purpose why I'm on the earth. At the moment, I don't know it, but I'm sure there is. And I pray that, I get help. And I started to now see that I needed help and embraced it and realized that I hated my skin. I hated being alive. I hated breathing in my skin. And I decided in 2013, a decade later, that I needed help. And believe you me, I then went in 100%, and I was, 100% assisted. And within a few months, honestly speaking, I can say that I reached a point where I was okay. And for the first time after that, leaving that that engagement, I then was okay, and I was free. My mind was free. I was not affected by this person's words in my mind. And I was not impacted at all, only in 2013. And that's when I actually then started to embark on writing a conclusion, because I wanted to really, to really go out there and encourage people. So not just to tell my story about how I was emotionally abused, but how did I actually come out of it, and how I actually got the healing. And what motivated me to also write the book was that in my life and in my practice, I realized that emotional abuse, there are common threads within the experience of abuse. So victims who will be survivors are struggling with similar things. And the one thing I wanted to show and emphasize was how you can feel trapped in a relationship, even though you could leave. How you could feel trapped if you are emotionally abused, because of the thoughts in your mind. So I wanted to emphasize how to some people, how to explain some of the experiences that you have, to show you, to make you understand that it's not just you. You are not crazy. This thing has happened to other people as well. And how you can overcome it is by going through this A, B, and C, and doing this and this. And so the book...
All right, that is that dialogue that's currently taking place that Parliament is holding on 16 Days of Activism of No Violence Against Women and Children under that theme, Act and Don't Look Away. We'll certainly be dipping in and out of that dialogue. For now, though, let's take a short break.